What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to my channel, Alchemist. Justin here, and are you ready to work with the energies of this month? Because November is jam-packed. I mean, it starts off like light. We get a nice little thing there, and then it's like right after the full moon, and once we get to like the middle of the week, it's just like transits. It's just like, and especially like that 16th, 17th, 18th. Man, it's just like a lot that's going to be going on here, a lot to kind of move through. Got a couple of hard aspects that's going to be coming through there. I'm looking at the 12th, that Mars Mercury conjunction. We'll talk about that. But then it's going to be retrograde city. that's a whole other thing that we're going to be getting into there. A lot to process in this one. But before we get into all that, if you're new here, again, my name is Justin, and one of the things that I do in this channel is talk about the Celestial News Monthly, and that talks about where the sun and the other classical planets are transiting, what aspects they're forming, what signs are going to be most affected, and how to most practically work with those energies as we're kind of working through and feeling through these things and navigating these omens that are coming through the sky here. So, and I'm going to even include some little new thing that I wanted to do here is just include just a couple of astronomical things that have been coming to the forefront that I've been meditating on, and I think there's something there to kind of process in that. But yes, yeah, I'm going to be going over the month of November. So let's go ahead and let's do like a monthly overview first to kind of just get situated into this thing. So starting off, we have Venus and Jupiter that are going to be forming a square. So that's nice. Us trying to come together, navigating this space. Because then we get into some trickiness. Then Mars is going to move into Sagittarius, and then it's going to start beginning its applying square to Saturn. That's not going to happen this month, but it's going to be something that's going to be building over here. The Sagittarius energy, as you see, is going to be growing there. Then we have a full moon that's going to be happening on the 5th. Venus is going to move into Scorpio, which is the sign of its detriment there, but we can still work with that Venusian energy. Especially with it being now, it's going to be in that trine aspect with Jupiter. So that's going to be kind of nice there, kind of help Venus out. And then, like I said, it's just like this retrograde two steps that's happening. First, we go and get into the 9th. Mercury's going to station retrograde. Then Big Papa thinks like, oh, you know what? You shouldn't do this by yourself. So let me go ahead and join you. Then Jupiter's going to station retrograde on the 11th, which that's going to bring some trickiness. We'll get into the retrogrades. I've never had to, when I was making this calendar, I've never had to copy and paste retrogrades so many times and then like size them. I was just like, what is happening? I'll tell you what's happening though. The one that I'm keeping that's kind of got my eyebrow raised is that we got that Mercury conjunction with Mars. But this one's happening in a fire sign now, happening in Sagittarius. So I feel like there's something there that's, that we want to keep an eye on there because, Sag just want to go big or go home. Then we get a little bit of a break there, get a few days, and then we get this kind of nice aspect here. We got the sun, and this is going to be interesting because this is going to be the first of three that's going to be happening. And this is something that Mercury and Mars just got done doing. Mercury's going to be doing this again. But we have the sun that's going to be forming a trine with both Jupiter and Saturn. Then Mercury is going to enter back into Scorpio on the 18th. We have a new moon on the 19th. And then we have on the 20th, we have a Cazimi that's going to be happening in Scorpio as well there. So now Mercury is going to be becoming a morning star. And then we get to, right after that, then the sun's going to enter into Sagittarius. And the Scorpio's busy. A lot going on there. And then, yeah, we get Sag. It's your birthday. I don't know if you've heard. But I got a many Sages to reach out to. I know I don't know how I wound up knowing as many Sagittarian suns as I do, but I'm not mad at it. Sag suns, risings, moons, I'm here for it. Then on the 22nd, like I said, Mercury is going to be forming that trine with first Saturn, then Jupiter. Then it's going to form a nice aspect with Venus. I think that's going to be, at least a little pleasant there, kind of Venus bringing in some balance. Then Venus is going to be doing that, all these grand water trines that are going to be happening. We got the 26th first with Jupiter, then with Saturn, and then I really like the 27th. And I'll discuss why when we get there, but I really like this when Saturn stations direct, not just because Saturn's out of retrograde, but there's something there. It's something with the benefics that is happening really nice that I want to kind of focus on as we're ending the month. And then Mercury's like, Saturn, that's a great idea, and then Mercury decides to go direct too, and that's fantastic. And then Venus moves into to Sagittarius to end off the month. Bit of a mixed bag, but we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and jump into that right now because on Sunday, excuse me, the 2nd of November, we have Venus is going to be squaring Big Papa, and that's going to be happening at 25 degrees and 1 minute. Venus is in Libra, and Jupiter is in Cancer. Now, the nice thing about this one is that this is the benefics talking. The square itself is a bit of a tough aspect. It can you can feel this sense of it's uncomfortable. It can be inharmonious and yet tensions that can come up with the square. They're kind of martial in nature. But with this aspect, this could be something where with the happening between the benefics, this could be something where we're sensing some things around. We could use some help. This could be one where it's just like we reach out to just like, hey, that Venus and Libra, like, hey, how have you been processing everything that's been going on here? Really kind of tapping into that feelings, that Jupiter in Cancer there. That way we can kind of lift each other up because the benefics are in great shape right now, and have been since Venus has been in Libra. But now, this is really reaching a peak point here, because then Venus is going to start to move into more kind of trickier waters, once it moves into Scorpio, which will be interesting. And then especially when it moves into Sagittarius things, so get a little bit tougher there for Venus. So while we have this really nice benefic energy, this can be a great time. The benefics want to bring love. They want to bring camaraderie and companionship and togetherness and this happiness. And Jupiter being the greater benefic, relief from all bad things, relief from bondage, abundance. Venus, the lesser benefic, brings about creativity and inventions. There's this sense of just a pleasurable energy with Venus. Venus reminds us to enjoy this experience. That there's so much that this experience has to offer, and to enjoy that with others. To this togetherness. So, I really like that. This is kind of how we're starting off the month. This would be a great, I think, energy to, if you can hang out with some friends. Oh, perfect, it's a Sunday. I might do something. But really, plan something where you can either, have just some fun, whatever that looks like for you. If it's like hanging out with friends, or even doing just some sort of like Venusian activity. Maybe you're doing some sprucing up around the home. Actually, speaking of like Venusian stuff in relationships, I'm in a Venus year. And, I've been really getting along with the neighbors that I have around here. And one of them just delivered flowers. And so it's just like, I need to let me clean up the place. Let me do a little bit more here, kind of liven up, really flex the Venusian energy. And it's those small little things, those little pleasures and treats that equal up to a big amount of abundance in the long run. Jupiter, and you think about Venus moves fast, so it's trying to give us just regular abundance, whereas Jupiter moves a bit slower, but the gifts are bigger. So it's like this is a great pocket, I think, to just kind of bottle up, to take with you, just to get a win on the schedule there. Even the moon's angular in this thing, just as something to just kind of bring your attention to there. The moon governs the people, so this is real good feel good energy and all this. Everyone's in a real strong position here, so that's something to think about as we're starting off there. And then we get to the 4th of November. That's going to be a Tuesday, and then Mars is going to enter into Sagittarius. Now, Mars in Sagittarius by itself is, that could be really cool, because Sag is ruled by Big Papa, and they are the mutable fire sign, and they are active or yang in nature. And there's this, because Jupiter promises if you trust in the process, you have faith in that there is something bigger, something brighter, something better. This world has so many adventures to offer. Then Sagittarius has this enthusiasm, and I think with having Mars there, this is taking it really is the quester. This is the knight, the one that's going after the grail. This is seeking something really kind of mystical, when we're thinking about Sagittarius, but something larger than life, whatever that means for you. And so I could see this Mars, I think, on a constructive standpoint, can be a very inspired, uplifting, can be very encouraging, really kind of get people stirred up, but not in like a pressure type of way. Like, yo, let me take you out. I'm gonna introduce you to a whole different experience. We're just gonna try something different. Just trust me. Trust me, you're gonna have a great time. It's just we're gonna get the fires moving. So, that's on a positive sense. Now, I will say, Mars is the lesser malefic, so there still is challenges with that. And this would be one where if you have mutable placements, that's going to be Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo. Depending on, if we're talking day, and this is going to be, of course, too, day versus night chart. If you have a day chart, this is going to be kind of challenging. When I'm thinking about it, when Mars first enters into Sagittarius, I have the moon at 0 degrees and 14 minutes of Gemini, so that's going to be the first thing that's going to be kind of coming through. But it's something to get, it helps you to get an eyes on, because Mars on a lesser end can be aggressive, it can be frustrating, it can leave you devoid of hope. It's abusive, it's like it's not a feel good energy. It can have you feeling imprisoned, and then frustrated on top of that. It's a weird energy, and that things happen fast, and it's never a fun party when Mars is, we're not working constructively with Mars. So be mindful of the heat, because I really think I know a couple of people who natally have Mars in Sagittarius, and they're like, I wouldn't want to pick a fight with them. So not, so no, yeah. So I would say definitely, finding healthy ways, especially if you do feel a lot of heat coming through there. Take it from someone who has, like, I have a lot of fire in my chart, and I have it in Leo, so sometimes it just like stores in the body. But I find with Sagittarius, it's just things I think can happen quickly, and the situation can change quickly. So having ways to just kind of channel that energy, just being mindful of that, I think can just be a healthy way of working with Mars. But another thing that I do want to bring to your attention, that now that Mars is in Sagittarius, it's in this overcoming square to Saturn by whole sign. And so that's going to be something that's going to be building now. And on top of that, Mars is coming up on Mercury now, because Mercury is getting ready to station here in here in a minute. So it's very, this is an interesting time for Mars, and I think that this is going to be one where we're going to want to be mindful, because Mars is going to be very prominent here soon, as it's going over. So it's already kind of starting. So I think that this is something to just kind of be mindful of, those martial themes of just like just kind of mindless aggression. Be mindful of how other people move your energy. I think that's something to think about too. Sag, I think on a negative end, I think about this story of oh goodness, it was either some sort of admiral or something that was in this army, had a real heavy Sagittarius stellium, and led their army into an ambush. It was just something really, really crazy like that. So just be kind of mindful of how how Mars can stir up the fires in this. Now, it's interesting, because then we get to the 6th of November, and this is going to be on a Thursday, and then Venus is going to enter into Scorpio. And now this is going to be something where if you have a lot of fixed placements, which I'm actually not mad at this one, because I have quite a few Leo placements, but if you have Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, or Scorpio, then Venus is maybe interacting with you more personally, especially too, and I would especially too, if you keep track of like your annual perfections, and if with these, especially when planets change signs, if you know that like Mars is the Time Lord of the year, Venus is the Time Lord of the year, like myself there, that's something you want to keep an eye on, so that you can really kind of, those transits are going to be more prominent. But when we're thinking about Venus in Scorpio, this is where it's opposite its home sign of Taurus here, one of its home signs here. It's a martial ruled sign. And Scorpio is the fixed water sign, the receptive or yin in nature. And Venus is, a couple of things that I like about Venus and Scorpio. I think that I think Venus really feels people on a different level. It intuits in a way and can relate to people in a way that, it doesn't in other signs. Scorpio is a very deep feeling sign, and it's very observant, very focused. And I think that it picks up on the nuances and things like that. So I think that this Venus one, it can be a real we want to be aware of how deeply we are connected to one another, you know. And I think that just like you sense that in, for example, I have this friendship that's been building over this years with this person, and they actually have their Scorpio rising, and we have these things where we'll think about each other, and then I've had moments where I'll think about her, and then she'll message me the minute I finish that thought, almost to the within a few minutes of me really thinking about her. And then they were just thinking about me not too long ago, and I had just happened to reach out to them. So it's like we, there's those relationships like that and those things, and you see those types of stuff. So it's like, and those are the kind of like sometimes even the more conscious ones that we are, you know, just being aware of the unconscious bonds that we form as well. I think with Venus and Scorpio, what are we attracting? You know, I think that that's something to think about, you know, how we're holding on to relationships, because I think what can happen too with Venus and Scorpio is that it can maybe hold on too tight, you know, that's you know, be something. But I think that Venus too in Scorpio, this is a great time to deepen those existing bonds, you know, to really express that sense of gratitude and loyalty and things. I think that's something a very trust is I think is a very big thing with Venus and Scorpio, you know. And that's hard to get back when it's breaks, because you know, with the water signs and with water placements, you know, when you got a feeling like that, and I think especially with like Scorpio, one that can hold on to that, if it's, you know, and that's something too, if you have a hard time maybe moving through those types of things, I find working with like either like bitter teas, like, yeah, I would check for like, you know, talk with your doctors for this one, but like just like St. John's wort is a really great herb, you know, if you're not taking any sort of like pharmaceuticals and things, because it works. But it's just gotta help you just kind of mix it with something, maybe like some chamomile, or maybe put that in like some honey, something like that, or like some ginger would be really nice, or like dark chocolate I think would be really nice. Kind of work with the senses with Venus, you know. And I think there's a real deep creativity with Venus in Scorpio. I think that there's a, you know, when you, because you know, Venus is about the joys and the pleasures and things like that. And I think that there's a, be mindful of course of indulgences, obviously, but I think that there is a, be allowing oneself to really to meet oneself real deep, you know, and to express oneself, you know. I think that there's a deep strong creativity with Venus, and to be able to hold that feeling of creativity and things I think is really powerful with Venus. And the one thing I really kind of like about this too is that now with Venus being this, it's coming in this overcoming trine by Jupiter here. So Big Papa's really kind of, even though Venus is not in it at its strongest here necessarily in Scorpio, it's getting that support from Jupiter, kind of helping that out there, helping Venus, you know, again, navigate these waters there. Venus is used to being a bit more grounded in Taurus, so here's kind of, you know, or maybe a little more free flowing in Pisces, but here things are a little more fixed, a little more, just a little bit different, a little more focused, you know. And so I remember even just like focus on like intensity, obsessions, you know. I think that's something to pay attention to. But you know, it's just because too, we're, you know, it's Venus is under that rulership of Mars, so I think that's something to just be mindful of there. Now we get to Sunday. Sunday, this is going to be the 9th of November, and we have Mercury that's going to be stationing retrograde at about 6 degrees and 51 minutes of Sagittarius. Now, one of the reasons that I painted this in, that I put this one in red, is that, you know, retrogrades themselves are kind of meh. No, like does anyone really care for a retrograde? And retrogrades aren't all bad. You know, it really just kind of depends, especially if like, and this would be one, like I was saying with like Venus and Mars, if Mercury is a time lord for you, then you're going to want to really tune into Mercury retrogrades, especially if you have any points between the 6 degrees and 51 minutes of Sagittarius, and I think it's about 20 degrees is in late 20-ish degrees of Scorpio. That's going to be, this Mercury retrograde is going to be working with you. And to give you an example of how that may personally look like for you, I have this transiting, like I said, I have my moon at early degrees early degrees of Gemini, so that Mercury is going to be opposing that. Once it enters back, it's going to square Venus, square Mars for me. So this is what I'm looking out for. I'm paying attention to some things around, like, I have a Leo rising, so things around, like, maybe around the home space, something around that, maybe around like pleasures, hobbies, things when Mercury's first starting off there. So we'll see. We'll see how that's looking. I've been keeping an eye on that for a little bit. But that's how you can just kind of mitigate these things. But another reason that this is really tricky is that if you're watching the video here, Mars is almost within that 3-degree range of this Mercury station. It's about when I got this chart here, it's at about 3 degrees and 46 minutes of Sagittarius. And so that conjunction is building. And this is their second conversation that they have. And this is now in a fire sign. This is not something, and we'll see, when I'm recording, this is still a little bit early. That conjunction hasn't happened between Mercury and Mars the first time yet, but it's building right now. And I think that this one is the one to really kind of keep an eye on. This one and the next one, because I think there's a lot of busyness that's going to be happening in Sagittarius going into Capricorn. So, this is going to be an interesting time there. I think that this station, just stay, be mindful, when we're thinking of communications. I think Mercury and Sag, this is where Mercury's in his detriment. Sometimes Sag can maybe communicate real big, kind of come in real hot, not really thinking about it, just saying the truth, then sometimes, and where that's not necessarily wrong, there's a bit of tact that's needed, I think, when we're working with that. So, that's something to just kind of to pay attention to there, especially any sort of like heated debates, because I think things can escalate really quickly when we're talking about that. And that may be something to pay attention to, any sort of news that comes up like globally and things like that. This is a little bit of a hot pocket, this retrograde here. And so, yeah, just something to kind of tune into there. I'm being kind of brought to even just kind of pay attention to that, or I'm not paying attention, like I'm looking at this moon kind of applying to the sun here. We'll see how things are going. I think that this can be a time for us to try to stay as level in the feelings as possible, to not, with that moon being in Cancer, the sun being in Scorpio, just being mindful of how we're initiating the feelings that we're holding on to, that's shaping how we move, that sun in Scorpio energy, how we're moving. So, yeah, just something I think to just think about there. Now this one I put as a little bit mindful there, because if Jupiter's going to station retrograde somewhere, at least let it be either in one of its home signs or in a sign of its exaltation. So I'm here for that. So we get to the 11th of November. That's going to be on a Tuesday, and then, yeah, like I said, Jupiter's just yeah, that looks fun. Let me go ahead and try. So now things are really retrograde heavy, and when you think about the retrogrades, that's just the energies here are maybe a bit delayed when we're thinking about that. The planets are slowing down, and we're kind of revisiting these topics. And so this would be something too. Jupiter's going to retrograde between 25 degrees and about 15 degrees or early 15 degrees of Cancer. And so if you have any points, especially around the cardinal placements, that's going to be Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, or Aries. This retrograde may be working more personally with you, and not necessarily in a bad way. This is Jupiter. This is a greater benefic in its state of exaltation. So look where you got Cancer at, because Jupiter's doing good work, in this portion of our chart. So this is where Jupiter, after its home sign, is doing its best outside of its sign here. So with this one, this is another example. Jupiter's going to retrograde, is going to station direct just right on my, maybe a little early on my sun placement. I have the sun at 15 degrees of Cancer. And so, and I think that there's something even interesting there too that may be happening there. How do I describe that? It's almost like it's like the sun, or not the sun, it's like Jupiter going back to, because if you look back to see the exact degree of exaltation for Jupiter is 15 degrees. So I thought that was really, really interesting, that's something that's coming up, or how that's coming up. So I think that this is a time to kind of look at maybe how we've been navigating what's been maybe happening around us and things like that. Again, seeing have we been operating in that as high of a place as we can. And it's not to look at that with a sense of judgment and things. It's like, sometimes the energies get crazy. We can get wrapped up and kind of thrown off kilter a bit. But it's just like, how do we get back on balance there? And I think that this is interesting too, that this station is happening, and again that Mars is getting really close to Mercury now. And so I think that this is one where, there may be a bit of delay in Jupiter beneficence, but it's like it's looking at that long-term picture, like it's keeping, like, yes, we got this, whatever is happening, either personally, publicly, whatever, however that's looking, the degree that that's looking, it's trying to stay, trying to navigate these feelings. I think respond, because now we're in this space is just water and fire right now. Even just looking at this chart here, it's kind of wild. And so this could be just like this to me gives like a boiling pot. Like a crab boil is something that I'm getting with this. So I think things can feel a little tension. So finding ways to relieve some of that tension, is something that's going to be important. Finding constructive ways to relieve that tension. Because then we get to the day. Then we get to the 12th of November. And that's going to be on a Wednesday. And then Mercury is going to be forming that conjunction with Mars. And that's going to happen at 6 degrees and 4 minutes of Sagittarius. And, on a constructive end, that's a very active Mercury. Like maybe not quite being as Mercury is a little bit weaker when it's retrograde. Those sort of energies there, but that's still a very inspired Mercury. That's still one that's fueled by Mars. That can be where very quick thinking, quick communicating. Quick, kind of going through. I think ideas can come as fast as they go. So that's something to like kind of ground some of those things. Write some stuff down if you find yourself feeling any sort of like inspirations and things like that. It may not make sense in the moment, but just like write it down to revisit later. Maybe you want to go. Like, I wonder what that's about. Google it, and then maybe save it as a tab for later. Create a like a grouping of just like, like to do or like, something to bring you back to it when that time makes sense, and then you might find that resource is just like, oh, now I know why that, then it makes sense maybe once Mercury goes direct, and figure out what kind of action to take there. But that's more kind of on a constructive end. I think that on a less constructive end, anything I think that's really kind of happening around that period of time is something that I think is going to be revisited once Mercury enters into Scorpio, and it's just going to take a long time to resolve. So I would be mindful of any sort of contentious conversations, like hot feelings. It's one thing, I'm not saying like to like just let people just kind of walk all over anything, but I do think that it's mindful of, there's a time and a place, and it's just like, if we want to have this thing, let's step it, let's go to a space like where we can be level-headed about this. It doesn't always have to end in violence. When we're talking about with Mars. But it's that it reminds me of like the martial artist. You don't learn it to take down people. You learn it to, well, I don't know if that's why you learn it, but that's, you see it in like those movies and things. That's where I think I might be pulling from right now. That's fine. But it's something like that. Something where it's like you're using this it's for a defense, for protection and things, as opposed for as a weapon. That's where I think that is trying to navigate that space responsibly. Because I think that things like Sag is, I think of, again, it's like a go big or go home type of energy. So, I think that things could, you be careful about picking the right one, because it's just, I think that people, the feelings tensions are high, and like I said, this energy feels here, the moon's getting ready to exit out of, going to kind of ground this energy here, but not before it forms, not before that aspect is baked in there. It's just fire and water. So just something I think to just pay attention to there. Now we get to the 16th. We kind of lighten things up a little bit. We kind of shake that off a little bit. Get to the 11th, or excuse me, the 16th of November. It's going to be on a Sunday, and then we have the Sun forming a trine with Big Papa, and that's going to happen at 25 degrees and 6 minutes. Sun's in Scorpio and Jupiter is in Cancer, and that's nice. That's a nice energy that could hopefully be something that's assuaging this whatever happened, with that Mars Mercury mess, and hopefully it wasn't a mess. Hopefully it was an opportunity to give people to just like forgive all of us, to just like rise up, to show, put our best foot forwards, whatever that looks like, to let that higher light of ourselves shine through, to be led. Because when you think about the sun, the sun is that the perception of the soul, that connection with spirit, that force that guides, that gives everything else life, that sets the tone for everything. This could be where maybe, some sort of like, this could be a great time to just like step up and be the one that kind of helps bring some sort of order. If not, if you want to bring order to the world, I'm here for that. But if on a like on a personal level, bringing order maybe to your space, like to like your home, in your family, in your friendships, in your something, whatever kind of forming those alliances, right, really kind of tapping into that ability of Jupiter. Because even with this energy is going on there, I think Jupiter is a reminder that there's still people being born. There's still people. I just had someone who just, I know a friend who just had a baby not too long ago. Someone who's getting, not getting married. They're getting married. There's a lot of good things that are happening too. That I think, and I think that this is a reminder that to keep that eye on the sunlight, to keep the eye at the light, at that, keep the eye on the finish line. That things, it's a cycle, that we're going through. This is when the trine creates this sense of ease. Is when the planets are 120 degrees apart from one another, and the trines are just beneficial, and they're just like, it's a very sympathetic conversation. Jupiter really understands the sun wants something better, wants to feel better, wants to feel brighter, and Jupiter's all about that. Jupiter's that act of mercy, that one that just is there to help you out, with no question, give you the shirt off your back, say less. Say, I got you. That's Jupiter. And I think that it's trying to be there for each other, as we're all going through these sort of like these points and periods in our lives there. Because you can tell that it all kind of fluctuates, that we have our good days and our more challenging days. So, I think that it kind of goes on there. We get into the next day, the 17th of November, it's on a Monday. And then we have the sun forming a trine with Saturn, and that's going to happen at 25 degrees and 15 minutes. Sun is still in Scorpio, and Saturn's retrograde in Pisces. Now, it's great that this is a trine. It's good. So I like that the sun's overcoming Saturn in this. But because I think that that's the sun, I think, committing to the work for the long haul. Like this is, again, that trine is a beneficial energy. It's that, yeah, Saturn things may take a long time. There may be anxieties around them. There are going to be doubts around them. There are going to be sense of like imposter syndrome. That's Saturn. But working through that, keeping the sun and the moon are really kind of associated with, or really closely associated with, the eyes. You can read that in some texts, and it's about seeing clearly, seeing the path clearly. And I think sometimes we need that connection to source, that connection to spirit, to guide us through those times that we're not sure what are coming yet. That these hardships are just not for nothing. And I think that, because the thing is, even though the trine is very beneficial, and this is nice, if we're going to be talking with a with a malefic, it better be a trine or a sextile than a horror aspect. But it's still the greater malefic we're talking about with Saturn there. So there's still going to be that challenge. There's still going to be the things that are going to try to put out the light. With the Saturn and the sun are just those kind of, they're naturally opposed one another. And so Saturn being the furthest away from the sun. But if you've ever seen Saturn at night, Saturn is a sight, but there is this sense of distance and kind of darkness and loneliness. But there's something fascinating with Saturn too. I think that, with Saturn getting closer to stationing direct, I think that I think right now with Saturn being retrograde, those qualities of the constructive qualities of Saturn have been taking a while to show up, but once it starts getting closer and closer to stationary direct, it'll be easier to tap into those sources. So that's just something to think about, I think, with the sun, when the sun and Saturn are trining one another there. I can see this is definitely even kind of like new, like sort of like news about a long-term plan possibly kind of showing up there. That's kind of a vibe that I'm getting, but now we enter a bit of mercurial energy, and this is one where I kind of wanted to. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But on the 18th of November, that's going to be on a Tuesday, Mercury is going to retrograde back into Scorpio. So it's almost like it's like Scorpio forgot something. It's like you walked outside, you get about halfway to your destination, you're like, oh shoot, did I turn the oven off? It's that kind of feeling. I think that sometimes that can maybe come up with this. That's the initial vibe that I get with that. But there's something that's being looked back at. That we're going back over. It's like, oh, I've been here before. Why did we revisit this again? What is this focus? Because again, I like Mercury in Scorpio. It is a very focused sign. I think it's a very observant placement for Mercury there. But it is a water sign. I think that it is an interesting place for Mercury to navigate some time to make sense, to make sense of the emotions, especially those stronger emotions that Scorpio might feel sometimes. But this is one where, again, now I would look where if you have those fixed placements now they're lit up. it's that Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo party. That's something where you're going to want to pay attention to, because Mercury is going to go back to about 20 degrees. And I would even, the closer you are to that, the more effective. But I would even go as far as like 20, probably to about even 17 degrees roughly, to where you might even start really feeling the potent effects of this. But if you have any fixed placement in general, look at this Scorpio stellium. There's a lot that's going on in the Scorpio section here. And one thing that I wanted to mention, because I'm going to be talking about more kind of Scorpio things as we get ready to jump into Thursday. But before I get into that, I wanted to mention something astronomically, that on the 19th, that Mercury is going to be in its perigee, and that's where it's going to be the closest in its orbit to the Earth, of us. And so that's something and something to think about now, that if you're able to, before Mercury enters back under the beams of the sun, something to think about. If you can still catch Mercury while Mercury's in Sagittarius, especially at that retrograde station. You can catch Mercury setting depending on your location. So that's something, if you want to keep an eye out for that. That's the only planet that I'm still trying to see. I've seen all the other planets of the classical planets, and of course the sun and the moon. So I'm glad that Mercury's about to become a morning star, because then I'll be able to watch it. I'll be able to catch it rising. So I'm just counting the days for that one. But that is something, I think there's something something significant there with Mercury being closest to the Earth, like how not necessarily as close as the moon is to the Earth, but like that sort of, that sense of feeling those mercurial things, because when the moon's big, it's a fat moon, so it's like Mercury being very visible like that. There's something there that I think those mercurial emphases are highlighted there. I think especially that intuitive mind, I think that where Mercury and Scorpio could have. So see what you sense. I think this would be a great time to do some kind of meditation in between this little pocket between the 18th and the 20th, because on a Thursday, the 20th of November, Mercury is it's going to conjunct the sun at 28 degrees and 18 minutes of Scorpio, having that Kazemi. And so as you see here, we just started, the new moon cycle just literally started. And there's something in that pocket, something really fascinating that I remember reading about the new moon, that if you want to do things that are hidden, that you don't want people to see, then do it while the moon is under the beams of the sun. Because the moon is that idea of what is delivered and is revealed into this world, that is grounded in this space. And so there's something that's taking root here, because now that Mercury's out of from under the beams of the sun and in the heart of the sun, this little period of time here, there's a sense of clarity that's happening. But there's some kind of thing that's happening behind the scenes. I'm just thinking that just because this Kazim is happening so close to that new moon, there's something that's happening in this new chapter that we may, as a collective, may just not be aware of yet. But if you sense something, trust that. I think that there's just something to trust your intuition, do some research, see what that means, have some conversation, something to kind of navigate these feelings. Because anytime the moon is really close to those sort of like aspects like that, there's something real pronounced about that. And I think there's something to really keep an eye on, as we kind of, as we're navigating the spaces. The Scorpio sector of our charts is really busy, and has been really busy as we've been kind of moving through this space. So really kind of understanding what Scorpio means and, what house that rules, whether you have it, whether you're working with whole sign or whatever house system that you're working with, know what's houses Scorpio split between. So something to keep in mind up there, because then we get into the 21st. And hold up, because I gotta take a minute. Sag. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday. It's your birthday. We gon' party. I'm trying to hit up a Sag right now. Trying to get a trip set up. But yes, happy solar return to you if you have your sun in Sagittarius. And this would be something where if you want to see what's coming up for you for the year, see what Time Lord alerts are going to be active for you for the year, down in the description box, we're doing a plug. There is a link for my consultation, so definitely check that out. And if you have any questions about the services that I provide, that my email is also down there, so definitely reach out to me with any questions that you have on there. But yeah, we get the sun in Sagittarius, and this is nice. The sun is in a Jupiter ruled sign. That's dope. The minus is that sun is closing in on Mars, very steadily coming up on Mars. That conjunction, that's going to be a really interesting one to watch, as the sun forms that conjunction with Venus and Mars as it moves into December and January. It's really fascinating what happens there. But normally the sun in Sag just by itself, the sun is in a fire sign, and it's in the sign of one of its allies, because the sun and Jupiter and Saturn are all part of the day sect. So this is a nice placement for the sun to be in. The sun does well in a fire sign, being a big ball of fire, a big ball of light. The sun is doing it big in Sag. It's doing it. It's bringing an abundance of life, an abundance. It's a force. When you think about the sun in Sag, the energies are moving. There's something that's just driving the body, whether it's to actually move, go see things, whether it's in the mind, like reading things. But the mind, it's Sag is active, and this would be a great time. I always feel really good when the sun enters into Sagittarius. I do, for the most part. The last year was a little trickiness, but that was Mars. Mars was in the mix. But generally, I like Sag periods. That is it can be a very inspired time. The spirit is moving, is inflamed, invoked. That's what that gives me. Invocation. When I think about the sun in Sagittarius, this is reaching the higher plane. Sag is look at the symbol for Sag. It's that arrow that's pointing up, the archers, the mythical beast. The Sagittarius is from when we start from Aries, like we do. Sag is the first sign in the zodiac that is something not of nature, that's not in this realm that we're aware of. It's a wild force, when you think about Sag. And I think that it's part horse. And I think that it needs to run wild and run free, like a wild horse. You would imagine them running on an open field and just majestic, when I think about this. Now, the one minus with this is that, like I said, the sun is co-present with Mars, and it's also it's starting that application with Saturn, and it's also too, at least while Venus is in Scorpio, the sun is moved from the support of the benefics now, because neither Venus nor Jupiter sees the sun. Now, the nice thing is that, again, the sun is at least in Jupiter's sign, but Jupiter is not really in a place where it can support it, like by aspect, like if the sun was in Pisces, then Jupiter has that flow there. But this one's a bit trickier. I think, to navigate with the sun and Sag. So this is just one I would just kind of be mindful of, just like how you're moved by things, because I'm even just looking at how the moon, the next aspect is applying is to Saturn. So there's we want to be responsible with the fire, but there may even be in a feeling, just as I'm kind of sitting in that, there may be this feeling of, of that horse is wanting to go off, but something is blocking it. Like, because I think of how the moon is going to run into Saturn as soon as the sun enters into Sag. There's something there that may feel like a bit of an impediment. I'm not quite sure what that could be. So there's just like kind of paying attention to that. As we kind of navigate this energy here. But then we get this grand water trine. It's really nice. That's going to be happening on the 22nd of November. And the nice thing about this one is that first it's going to be happening on the same day, which is really cool. Mercury is going to form a trine with Saturn at 25 degrees and 11 minutes of Scorpio. Then it's going to form a trine with Big Papa, which is going to happen at 24 minutes and 24 degrees and 56 minutes of Scorpio. So the really kind of nice thing about that, when you think about just like a grand water trine, there's just a lot of flow here. When we think about water, that's the feelings, that's the emotions, that's the water is fluid, it's adaptable, it's changeable, it's impressionable, and that's where I think that this could be a really nice one for, like, for example, like positive affirmations. This could be a really good one for, just with Big Papa being in the mix, just thinking about the people that you connect with, that you vibe with, and how they make you feel. How does talking with them make you feel in the various stages of your relationship? Really kind of analyze that. How's that progress? That sort of because Saturn's in the mix in here too, because even though it's a trine, I don't like to take that the fact that it's still Saturn, and there's still some kind of thing that we're working through, something that we maybe need to, and that's the first thing that we're talking about, because Mercury's going to back up to Saturn. So it's like, there's something that we're revisiting with Saturn. In order to get this growth, we got to get through that Saturnian thing first, find out what may be blocking this relationship, blocking this union, what may be blocking the abundance. If you've been feeling like there's been a lack of flow, there's not been that ease that you've been wanting in your life. This could be that sort of like revelation, really kind of pondering the things of your life. What can I do differently? Really kind of look at your life in a detective way, like you're trying to find that culprit, of that's Scorpio. It's like Scorpio is, when you think about I remember, I'm not quite how sure this is, I should probably look this up, but I remember reading something where Scorpions can feel the vibrations on the earth. And that's really fascinating. I think about that, how, like that must feel in the body, and like how that must shake the venom in the scorpion, and it's just like, is this a threat, or is this, what is this that's coming there, that I'm feeling there? So there's something really deep there, and something very useful that I think could come up in this little water grand trine that's happening in the Mercury sector. Just something to think about. Because then I think you could look at that. We get just kind of this nice back-to-back green days here, which I think we deserve. Like it's been a lot of energies that I think we've been navigating through, and this is one I think I want to take a minute and just kind of sit in that. Like it can be so easy to get caught up about what's the hard things that to come, what are going to be the next challenges and things, and not take the time to really see the moments of ease. When you have these really nice aspects with, Mercury coming back to Venus, it's like Mercury's gone through that. It started off with that harshness with Mars and whatever the F that was. And then then we go back to the sun. It's just like getting some clarity on it. And Venus is just like, there you go. We get it. Now hopefully we can laugh about it. We can kind of laugh about it and put this thing behind us. That's what I'm really, one sort of feeling that I'm getting with that Venus conjunction, because the conjunction is, as you see, is where the planets are. They're on the same degrees, 22 degrees and 45 minutes of Scorpio. And there's that Mercury energy is infused with that Venusian energy. This could be having those really thoughtful conversations, and making a space for creating a safe space. That's what I think too. When we're working with emotions, just a period, but emotions in under the energies of Scorpio, you want to have that sense of a safe space. That you feel like you can say what you can say without being judged, and not we're saying things that were hurtful, but that we're being honest. We're being vulnerable in this. That we're allowing ourselves that sense to be because Venus is the receiving of nourishment for those who are receptive to it. Though you have to be able to receive Venus in order to appreciate the beneficence, and especially in this fixed sign. That's something that I've had to learn. Something that I've been really navigating as Venus has been transiting through my charts, and I've been watching Venus more closely. I've not appreciated Venus like I could have over the years, and Venus has done a lot for me. Like in not maybe the biggest of ways, but in very notable ways. Maybe not quite like Big Papa because I have a day chart, but it is, I don't doubt I see where Venus delivers, and I see where Venus delivers for night charts, and that's nice that you get it on the regular, when we're talking with Venus. It's not, you don't got to wait a year. You don't got to wait till where I love Jupiter in Cancer. I need Jupiter to be in Leo. I need that right now, but I got to wait. But Venus is like, yeah, wait, I'm moving. Maybe you got to wait when I go retrograde, but that's like once every couple of years. So it's like Venus doesn't even do it regular. You retrograde regularly. So it's like something just really nice that I just wanted to take a minute and just really kind of sit in that Venusian, the goodness, and really kind of take that goodness in, because it's not stopping. You thought I was done. Of course not. Because because on the 26th of November, on a Wednesday, the Venus is doing the same thing Mercury was doing, but quite actually in reverse. Venus is starting off trining Jupiter at 24 degrees and 46 minutes of Scorpio, and then is going to trine Saturn at 25 degrees and 9 minutes of Scorpio. Now, and I should probably mention those times. For the Mercury one, for Saturn, is going to be about 10:45 a.m. The Jupiter is going to be at about 3:36 p.m., and that's Pacific time. Oh, and one thing that I wanted to mention too, let me back all the way up, back to the beginning of the month. If I didn't mention before, is daylight savings if that's acknowledged where you live. So be mindful of that. Probably should have led with that one. Thankfully I did on the other video that I did, so that's fine. Just something to pay attention to there. And then Venus is going to form these aspects with Big Papa at 8:31 a.m. Pacific time, and then with Saturn at about 3:47 p.m. Pacific time. So this is good. This is nice. This is Venus in this. Because the nice thing about this, what I do like about this, that's better than the other ones, is that both of the benefics are talking with Saturn. It's like this is really them trying to mitigate any sort of long-term damage that otherwise Saturn could possibly do in whatever this is. Because as you see, if you're looking at the chart here, Mars is clicking on whatever is coming up with that Mars squared Saturn nonsense. So this, in the meanwhile, is a time for us to get, the analogy that I've been using is getting ready. If you know a storm is coming, when I used to live in Florida, you hear about the hurricane warnings. You got stocked. You could either sit there and pray, or you could do that plus get ready. Get stocked up on some food. Make sure you got batteries. Make sure you got this. Get in the situation that you need to get doing in order to mitigate this stuff as much as possible. And that's what Venus and Jupiter feel like they're doing in this aspect as things have been building up. Especially once Venus gets within range of Jupiter, within that 3-degree range. That's where I really think that niceness really starts a cooking. And I think that's where it's, the more kind of deeply we meet ourselves, the deeper we can meet each other in every aspect of our relationships. It's something really powerful. Look at this. Even the moon wants to get in on this goodness. The moon it's separating from a trine from a sextile with Mars, and the next aspect, it's going to form with Mercury, but that's fine. That's fine. Don't let that dampen your day, because now we're talking about the goodness that's going to be coming, like that moon. But really, that's something I think to think about with this one. This is as nice as it gets. This is well, no, I mean almost as nice as it gets. This is really, 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 really nice. But what I really enjoy is this next day. I love this direct station right here. This happens on the 27th of November. It's happening on a Thursday, and Saturn's going to station direct at 25 degrees and 9 minutes of Pisces. Now, why I'm so stoked about this, we're just going to bring your attention to it right off the bat. Jupiter's at 24 degrees and 42 minutes of Cancer. Venus is at 26 degrees and 37 minutes of Scorpio. So this little direct station here is being enclosed by the benefics. There's this protection that is being encased around Saturn from Mars, honestly, because Mars is coming in hot with whatever the hell that is. But Saturn in this instance, like, you know what? We see you, Mars. We see you, and no thank you. No thank you. I'm going to start doing this stuff now, mitigating as much as I can. Instead of being anxious, letting the anxieties of Saturn come through and whatever, the laziness, the sluggishness. This is a great time to get proactive, to get I don't want to feel like this anymore. I want to change this thing. I want to, because it's like all the water energies are lined up. That's really fascinating when you think about that. When these aspects happen here in the sky like that. Something I think really, really nice can happen at the Saturn direct that can have really long-term benefits. And that's Saturn. You don't get to say those combinations of words with Saturn that often. So that's dope. That's really, really great. And I think that that's something that is worth not even exaggerating, but just really emphasizing. I think that it's really dope. And I think that I think it's a great way to think about it, because then we move into the 29th. I pretty much, the rest of these slides are about basically in green, which is, again, a nice place to end on. I think a nice place where we can try to move the energy towards. I think that's where the least the intention is at. That's where I think what is trying to be done here. But we have on the 29th of November, that's going to be on a Saturday, Mercury is like, yeah, it's Saturn. I'm kind of over going backwards in the zodiac. Let me go ahead and station direct. And so Mercury decides to do that at about 20 degrees and 42 minutes of Scorpio, which love that. That's great. Because the nice thing, too, it won't happen right now, but then Mercury's going to high-five Jupiter a third time. And so that's going to be really cool. I think that there's something hopefully positive there that's going to be happening. But now things should, as Mercury gets ready to move back forward, this could be where, again, if there were any sort of aspects that are happening, this is going to be coming up again for the third time. But now you should have a feel for what Mercury was trying to do. I remember when I had right around the time I entered that Mercury year, it was like a week before my birthday, or a week after my birthday, Mercury stationed retrograde, and that was a mess. But now it's, when you moves forward, it's such a relief, because then you're like, okay, you get into the groove of that retrograde, see what was going on, you revisit some things like, oh, that's not going to work, that was a good idea in theory, and then things get moving again, get feeling back. It's like a revision period, I think, when Mercury is retrograde period time. But when it's direct, it is like a nice sort of like, whew, okay, let's go. But you know what? And this could be too, especially if you have Mercury retrograde. Those could be really kind of pivotal moments for you too, especially if you have it around, like retrograde around those degrees of like Scorpio and Sagittarius. But don't knock a Mercury transit. I think that this could be a time of mental clarity, things moving forward, having a better feeling of where you're going, or at least better feeling of the things that you've just processed and how you're going to move through those emotions going forward, which I think would be a very great place for the work with that kind of direct station there to kind of lean into that forward momentum. Because then we get to the last aspect of the month, and that's going to be the 30th of November. That's going to happen on a Sunday. And we have Venus entering into Sagittarius. Now we're starting to build up that lot of Sag energy. That's good, as things are getting hot. But Venus in Sag, things are getting hot. That's nice. It's a really kind of, I think, can be on a real positive end. Venus in a fire sign is very outgoing, is very, get very charismatic, but it get more kind of forward than maybe Venus is normally used to be. But this feels like a very jovial Venus, one that is, just knows has just like the right, just kind of jokes, is really kind of quick on its feet, just knows what to do, knows what to say, has a really cool, knows the really cool kind of music, introduces you to the cool art. This is a great time to just expand your horizon. If you remember, Sag is ruled by Big Papa, and there's a lot that this world has to offer, and a lot of gifts that I think that can be found in this experience. But something in this instance, with it being more active, is going out there and getting it, going out there and seeing it, and even in some instances, going out there and creating it. I think that's something important to think about with Venus. But also too, this could be a really even kind of active time. When we think about Venus and like finances, thinking about things, spending it more towards like expanding your worldview, expand your avenue, maybe making sort of like new investments with your cash. That might even be something to think about, when we're working with kind of this Venus and this fresh kind of Sag energy, when we're kind of thinking about that. But I do like that. I like the enthusiasm. I like all those things. But this again is just like how with the sun, Venus moves out from under the rays of Jupiter for a little bit. And so now Venus is kind of on its own here, and it's kind of trying to bring this beneficence. But now Venus is in a similar situation with the sun, where Venus is picking up speed fast. Venus is on its way to becoming an evening star here soon. It's just inching along, and Venus is under the beams of the sun. And it's a bit weakened when Venus is under the beams, because when you just imagine in the sky, you can't see Venus anymore, and so there's something there with that being co-present with Mars, another kind of downer, and then it being also in that kind of overcoming trine with Saturn, or excuse me, square with Saturn. Now I like that it's in the superior position to Saturn. That's that's more positive than not. We try to take the wins where we can, but it still does feel like Venus is about to get worked. Like it's about to be, she's going to need those things to help keep the energy moving. To keep it inspired. Do those Venusian things and make them habitual thing. I think that's why, again, Venus does so well in like its home sign of Taurus, because it's used to consistency. It's used to being persistent, being patient, being practical, and things like that. But this feels like Venus more in its kind of Libra element, where it's a bit more active, where it needs to kind of think on its toes a bit more, where it needs to give you some creative thinking. Again, maybe needs to call on its allies, to find resources that maybe Venus doesn't have, like it just on its person, where it may have to be an extension, to learn from someone's expertise, so that would be another actually really great way to learn from experts in whatever craft that you want to do. I think that'd be a really nice way for Venus in Sag to explore different avenues of art, ways of expressing yourself. I think would be a really cool way for Venus and Sag to be, the feminine energy is just stronger, with Venus, it's more active, more fiery. Even look at the moon. The moon's even kicking in a fire sign. But yeah, just something I think to think about there with that Venus and Sag as we kind of end off the month there. I overall like this. We can only make these predictions, work with the signs that we see in the sky, and just hope that that's how things, try to intend that as much as we can, and I think that this month is trying to get it to where, there are signs that things are trying to move in a different direction. It's not going to be just easy though, and it's not going to be forever. One thing that I've been thinking about over the last couple weeks is just thinking about just the idea of time, and how you do have these certain, like, especially just starting to do more like electional astrology and things and consultations like that, like how you do have these window pockets, and how, like the doors only open a certain amount of time, and then that door does close, and the energy's not the same. It's not that same like it'll be that other time, and you just got to see, well, where's the next good pocket, and just got to keep moving and get ahead of things. That's where I think the energies are trying to help us get ahead of stuff, to see that there's more, that we can take more control, than I think we maybe give ourselves credit for. At first it was about feeling that sense of what was happening, maybe was a little bit of discomfort, but the sense of that, maybe I can shift things around a little bit now. And now that fire's like, I'm ready to evaporate that and move things, take what's been ingrained in us and channel it differently. I think that that's where this energy is kind of leading us there, and I think that that could be a nice way of working with November, collectively. I think that could be really nice. So, whew, yeah, a lot to a lot to kind of process with that one there. Definitely, it's definitely a big, like I said, a busy, busy, busy month. I mean, after an hour in, I was just like, oof, yeah, we have that quite a bit to cover there, but. Hopefully this is helpful there for you, and just something to keep in mind too. I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning there too, but there are going to be timestamps for this video, so you can go to each of the days and go to each section that you can find that. So that's just something that's there for you as well. Now I'm gonna see if I can find any more words, but yeah, that's going to be something that's available for you. But also too, like I said, I've mentioned my services. All that information is down in the description box as well. But there are also a link for a couple of playlists. One for this, the Celestial News Monthly, and one for the Lunar Shenanigans. That's why I like to, as you see, I made little mentions of things around the moon, especially when the moon was doing things, because the moon is so closely tied to us, and I have this separate segment called Lunar Shenanigans, where I talk about the astrology of the moon, what sign it's in, what phase it's in, when it happens to go void of course, and just to get a feel of the energies for each week, as the moon has a different conversation with each of the celestial bodies and then distributes that energy down to us. So that's just something to kind of help if you want to navigate this energy on a weekly basis. That's available for you there as well. And then, like, again, if you want to support me on Patreon, my link is down there. So definitely go check that out. I have 2 tiers that are available. Well, actually, I guess I have 3 tiers. That one that I'm gonna be, I should be finished by the time I'm done, done with this one. But it'll include basically just the Lunar Shenanigans and the Celestial News Monthly. It'll be just the astrology, or the Alchemist Date astrology podcast, and I think that will allow me to get it to like Spotify and things. I'll keep everyone posted on that as I get this technology thing figured out. But that's going to be one of the what's free that's on my Patreon tier, and then I have 2 paid tiers. One that has the Lucky Day podcast for the auspicious dates of each month, and if you want to plan any sort of elections, whether it be planning a trip, purchasing a home, signing a contract, sending an email, whatever that might look like. So that's going to be something that's available. And then the second tier deals with gets you the podcast plus a monthly personalized transit report from me each month. And I do a recording and a little write-up for that one as well. So nice bunch of little goodies there for you. But that's all I got for you there. So until next time, stay mindful out there. If you keep raising that vibration through the roof, I'm going to join you. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.